Welcome to today's edition of Golden Moments and Memories. This is a video program that is sponsored by the University of North Georgia Alumni Association in conjunction with the North Georgia Corps of Cadets Association, the Women of North Georgia, and the Young Alumni. It's a series that's been going on for about a year, maybe a little bit more. And in particular, we're trying to emphasize this is the sesquicentennial of the 150th anniversary of the university. And we have been privileged to have a number of alumni, faculty, and friends of the university that we've been able to sit and chat with. And today I'm very pleased that we have with us a gentleman, Dr. Frank McConnell, who everybody calls Mac McConnell, who I have had the privilege of knowing probably since the 1990s. And we're going to sit and chat a little bit with Mac, but let me give you also the fact that he is a North Georgia graduate. He holds the position currently as the Senior Vice President of Business and Finance, and in addition, he has picked up a faculty title where he works in the master's program with the College of Education. So, Dr. McConnell, we welcome you today. We appreciate you being with us and taking the time out of your busy schedule. Why don't we start off with, I think you probably are the longest tenured person that I have had the privilege of being with. Now, we've had some alumni who graduated in the 50s and 60s, but you're probably the longest tenured person. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you got to North Georgia, how you ended up in the position you're in, so forth, and just go for it.
Glad to do it. Thank you, John, and thank you to the Alumni Association and others for having me here today. I'm really honored to have that opportunity. I'm a native of Dahlonega. I was actually born in Hall County Hospital in Gainesville, but I've lived my entire life in Dahlonega. And so as we were growing up, we were referred to by a couple of names. We were called Dirty Feet because particularly when we came to school here, because, we didn't have enough money to have shoes, and
Right.
then if you weren't in the Corps of Cadets, which I was local and had a full-time job, I was not in the Corps, so I was called a hairbag, despite evidence today. That was that was a couple of the names. So I have been around the college, or now the University of North Georgia, really all of my life. And growing up, I knew all the Watson boys. So Miss Watson was the dietitian. Many of you all will know her. And so because of the Watson boys, one was my classmate, Paul, good friends. And so we hung out over at the college even during our high school days, and probably annoyed most of the undergraduates at the time. But so been around the college really my entire life. And so when it came time to go to college, I enrolled at North Georgia College at the time, and so got my undergraduate degree in accounting at North Georgia.
What year was that?
It was I graduated in the summer of 1980.
Okay.
And then I was, for the next 7 or 8 years, I was not affiliated directly with the college. My first job at that point was with Georgia Marble Company over in Tate, Georgia, as a plant accountant. So I started right into the accounting and payroll and all of that, and then did a couple of things. Went to California and studied computers with an outfit that was set when computers were just first becoming commodities, and PCs and all of that. And so I thought I was going to do that, and did it for a little while. And then I worked for Gannett Corporation for a while, and they're in the newspaper and broadcast business. And their accounting system all at that time was really tremendous, and they beamed financial statements via satellite. Which was actually even before the internet. So married my wife, Tona Narelle McConnell. She's a graduate of North Georgia. She was in the second cohort of nursing, so she She's an RN and graduate, and we've had two sons, and both of those graduated from North Georgia. So we have a long history with the university and a long love for it. So kind of in the late 80s, life circumstances, I was fast tracking with Gannett Corporation, but with those kind of outfits, they want you to move wherever they need you really quick. And so at the time, my wife's parents and my parents were in declining health, and so doing that kind of thing didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I was made aware of the Director of Procurement job at University of North Georgia, then North Georgia College. So I was hired into that job in September of '87.
Okay.
Took a substantial cut in pay, came to work for the state, and have been trudging along ever since. So since September of '87, I did that job for 10 years, and then thought, well, you can't really move up from Director of Procurement. It was kind of hard. In the meantime, I'd also gotten, when I was at Georgia Marble Company, I got my MBA at Mercer University and graduated from that program in 1983. And so I had about decided, well, I'm going to leave. We got 10 years, so you're vested. I'm going to go ahead and leave North Georgia. And that was when the IT market was red hot again, and everybody's going to get rich. This is before the .com burst and all of that. And then my mom was still alive, and she said, maybe you should just hang around North Georgia for another year or two. And so I took her advice, thank goodness. And so as it turned out, very soon thereafter, the controller in North Georgia retired, and that created an opportunity. And then Bill Gershbacher, who was the vice president for business, hired me as controller. And so in 1987, in 97, became controller. And then as circumstances evolved, a year later, Mr. Gershbacher decided he would retire. And so then suddenly the vice president position was open. And Sherman Day was president, interim, well, he was full president at that time. And so he came in, and turns out all the vice presidents had retired, just that time. And he hired me as acting vice president for business. Since he was only going to work another couple of years, I thought it made sense to let the next president hire the vice presidents. So both Phil Buckeister, who was in the acting vice president for for academic affairs, I was acting vice president for business. So when Nat Hansford came in as president, and so did a national search for both of those jobs, and both Phil and I were lucky enough to get the regular positions. So it became, really since 1998 through now, so for the last 25 years, I've been acting vice president for business, been the vice president for business and finance, and then I think then if you get old enough, they make you senior vice president for business and finance. So that's the role I'm in now, and right at 25 years as the vice president for business.
That is quite a history and quite a tenure, and you obviously have done very well, and not only from the accolades from the administration, but from alumni and core folks too. We really love you having you in that role. You started mentioning some names. How many presidents have you actually, even going back to the procurement days? I guess that was Dr. Owens or so, probably.
So Dr. Owen, Dr. Allen,
right.
Bill Gershbacher was president twice, I think, during that time.
Okay.
So, and as vice president for business, I worked for 4 presidents. So 4 or 5, so about 7,
right.
7 different presidents, and then 4 in the senior role.
Right.
And so it's been, really quite a privilege. And then I would say in 2017, I elected to go back and get my doctorate degree.
Right.
And so I got my doctorate in higher ed administration from the University of Georgia. And then I've been lucky enough, and Dr. Jacobs has allowed me to teach in our doctoral program in the College of Education.
Okay.
So I teach higher ed finance in the summer months for the doctoral cohort. And so this summer will mark the 5th year that I've taught in that program, and I just thoroughly enjoy that. And it's interesting. The program is great, and the students are really fantastic.
Well, obviously the university, we both love it and been here, and has such a good reputation, and we've been very fortunate, particularly in the last 20 years or so, to have such great presidents that you've been associated with.
Absolutely.
But and Dr. Jacobs, unfortunately, is going to be leaving us within the next year. But it's been a great 20 years. Well, tell us a little bit more about some of your experiences here. I mean, as a dirty foot, that's the term I remember.
Yes.
That means you were a commuter student, but
that's correct.
Was there any particular things that jump out, things that happened while you were a student or when you were?
Well, during the time that I was a student, some of you all will remember streaking, and when that was a thing, and the record will reflect, I did not streak. But I can remember that hundreds of people from Dahlonega would come around the drill field at night, right around dusky dark, and wait to see if somebody was going to try to streak. So while not particularly academic, it was quite the sight to see some people trot across the drill field, and they would go up near Price Memorial and go all the way up past the military housing.
Wow.
So
thankfully I missed that part of the tenure.
Yeah.
Well, what about talk a little bit about the phenomenal growth of the physical plant, the campus, and how it's grown, and the buildings, because you've been an integral part of all of that, I know, as far as the budget and procurement of properties and that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, we really have been quite blessed in the last 20 years. We've done hundreds of millions of dollars in new construction and refurbishments, and it is something I'm quite proud of, and I think has really had a really substantial impact on the Dahlonega campus of UNG, realizing we consolidated in 2013 and became 5 campuses,
right,
4, and then added Blue Ridge. But the Dahlonega campus, most of the construction work kind of finished up in the late 70s, and there wasn't a whole lot of activity. And then so things got to a point where they needed to be refurbished or replaced, etc. And so we were able, because of steady enrollment and solid financials, to do quite a bit of work. And so during that period of time, we refurbished all of the residential housing. We created a whole new military village, so with 2 new military designed for the Corps Cadets. And then Gaillard Hall, we elected to restore that one because of its architectural importance, etc. So, and then we did similar work in the non-resident halls. They've all either been replaced or refurbished. So, quite proud of that. We built a new dining hall, new health center, new bookstore area. We created the top of the area called Radar Ridge. Now we have a substantial student recreation space. And so that space is just for students, and it's not for our athletic programs.
And that was part of, about a 200-acre purchase that was made?
Yeah, during the Nat Hansford era, we bought, I think it's closer to 400 acres, 400 acres. Up in that area. And so now we've taken the first part of that, put turf down, slided, so the Corps Cadets can go up there and run their PT test on an official track, which is important to them, and do other exercises, and still have the wooded areas to support other activities for the Corps, and then just untold activities for just the general student body, and club sports, etc.
Now there's an area that a lot of people probably are not as familiar with, and my term, I don't know if that's the campus term, it's kind of the West Campus on the other side of the the hill up there. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about that, how that came about, and what all's back there.
Where the rec center space is on Radar Ridge, or are you talking
No,
about?
I'm talking about behind the old infirmary and up behind the Morehouse.
Yeah, so many will remember that was faculty housing back in the day and so forth. So we built a health and natural science building up there. That was teed up about the time in the Sherman Day era. It was completed during the Nat Hansford presidency, that particular building. And then behind that, we built a series of residence halls that have really just tremendous views of the mountains, and our students really like that. And then we relocated plant operations, which was originally across from the Dairy Queen as you come into town.
Right.
We repurposed that whole space for the military.
Right.
And then so we put our plant operations on the very back end of that property.
And we've had now 3 different chow halls, or in my memory.
Yeah, I think 3. Yeah.
And currently the beautiful one up at the head of the drill field where old Sanford Hall.
Yes. Yeah, so we put that one in. It's got a 300-seat banquet area. Can feed almost 1,000 on the bottom area. Students come in at all times, still really popular. We have a late night diner that's in the same complex that's open after hours. Students oftentimes like to eat a little later and study later, etc. So we did all of that. The other part, kind of in the whole neck of the woods, the outdoor athletic facilities really transformed maybe in the last decade.
Yes.
And that's been in large part from investments from 4 presidents now, and a good deal of private support. We also built a new convocation center.
Oh, yeah.
So, and now we've just this fall opened up the Cottrell Center for technology, for business technology and innovation. So those have been really, I like to call them transformational projects because I believe that they are.
Sure.
And they really are kind of redefining what the campus looks like, and I think a very beautiful, modern, up-to-date products for our students, who are our most important part. Additionally, we have planned, I mentioned the old plant operations building across from the Dairy Queen. It's the Military Leadership Center, and we did a really nice renovation of that 15 years ago or more, but they've completely outgrown it, etc. There's a whole new plan. I hope you all have seen that, for 4 new buildings to support the Corps Cadets at the University of North Georgia. And phase 1 of that, the first building, is making its way through the legislature this year. They just started in January, where we would, the funding cycle sometimes takes 3 years. We get design, construction, and then equipment. So the design piece is making its way through the legislature. We'll know end of March for sure that it made it through. We're highly confident that it will. And by, we hope, fourth quarter of 24, we'll have building 1 completed.
Right.
And then our current thought process is that we'll combine the next 3 and do those in one project.
Well, I'm really looking forward to that. Now, we've pretty much covered the Dahlonega campus, but I know that you have had also you've got a new building at Blue Ridge, and I think you're going to expand that one. You got we got a building incoming, and you're about to build a second one with that, and
yes.
You've had the Lanier Tech stuff come on board at Gainesville, etc. So it's not just the Dahlonega campus that's experiencing this wonderful infusion of students and funding, but you want to expand on some of that?
No, you are correct, and start with Gainesville. The Gainesville campus, Lanier Tech got a new facility a few miles down the road from where they were, and then Governor Deal gave UNG the old Lanier Tech campus. It's quite a number of acres and a number of buildings. So they needed some renovation, etc. We invested, $5 to $7 million in those facilities, and they really are world class now. We expanded our nursing operation there quite a bit, and we have a nursing simulation center there that may be the envy of North Georgia area. It's really state of the art, and so it is through those works have enabled us to grow our nursing program, and we're trying to expand that, get more registered nurses in the workforce, etc. So it enables us to respond to the workforce need, etc. So the Blue Ridge campus has one new academic building, and then the late speaker, David Ralston, last year in the legislative process, helped us provided funding for a second building.
Right.
So Blue Ridge will have two buildings, a beautiful campus, beautiful part of the country, and so we are continuing to design our academic programs that are best in service to that region, to equip folks from that part of the state to maybe do their first 2 years of study there, then come on to the Delonga campus or wherever, or online, however they want to complete their bachelor degree, etc. So that one is doing quite well. The Cumming campus, as you mentioned, through several years of going through the legislature, it was finally funded, and so we'll be breaking ground very soon that will more than double the amount of square footage on the Cumming campus.
Right.
And Cumming, where it's located on Georgia 400, and that whole explosion up 400 of traffic and so forth, that campus will continue to do extremely well. All of our campuses are important. The Oconee campus in Watkinsville, we're really landlocked.
I've been down there, and it really is. It's just right there on.
It has the highest space utilization and room utilization of any campus, any in the system. Right. Of the 26 schools. We have and continue to work a number of projects, either trying to buy land or to partner with the county and different groups to try to find opportunity to add space. Yeah. And it may be that we build a multi-story academic building with structured parking, which is an expensive way to go, but that is absolutely a great campus for University of North Georgia. You might not think it is, but it really is. And the quality of students there are outstanding. 600 a year would transfer to the University of Georgia after the fall semester. We retain a high percentage of those who stay with UNG to finish their bachelor's degrees. Others go to Georgia Tech and others. So that is a good campus for us too.
I was actually on that campus last week utilizing some of their conference room space for talking about potential additional scholarships for the university.
Right.
We've talked about all this expansion, and we've talked about I think we are somewhere between 19,000 and 20,000 students. But how about telling us a little bit about the actual merger back in 2013? And I know that it was a big deal, but there was a lot of intricacies, I guess is the word, that we probably don't know about. But what's your impression of how that went, and what was your involvement in some of that?
Well, I was heavily involved in it. We tend to use the word consolidation more than merger, although Dr. Jacobs has recently wrote a book that talks about merger, and probably the term's not really all that important. But so for the first 6 months, both administrations, the Gainesville State College and the University of North Georgia College State University at the time, the full cabinets were in place. Dr. Nesbitt from Gainesville had announced her retirement, and a couple of their VPs had announced already. But so for just a little bit, we both sat around and thought about our sad lot in life. Well, we don't want to consolidate, but that quickly dissipated, and then we began having all sorts of meetings together, very intentional about where we met and how we met, etc. And then trust has to be earned, and you do that by being transparent and how you deal with people. And I think we're very successful in how we did that. And I would argue that UNG's consolidation went better than most. Our foundations consolidated, and they were the first to do that. There were, four consolidations at the same time. I think there's been about 6 now. And so ours, again, blessed with really strong membership on the philanthropic boards, both at Gainesville and Dahlonega. That really helped on their side. They're really quality people and faculty at Gainesville and Dahlonega, etc. So, pretty soon we began saying, let's help. This is happening, so let's put it together, make it something that is unique and that will really drive the whole region forward.
Right.
And I think we were successful in doing that.
Yep. There's, as I recall, even what was it, Dr. Richard Oates or somebody was even sent to help with some of the other mergers around. Maybe there were others involved too.
Yeah.
With other universities and
Yeah.
their colleges. From an alumni standpoint, we were all kind of holding our breath and waiting to see how this was all going to turn out. But it has turned out fabulous, and thanks to you and Dr. Jacobs and others for.
Well, to you and the alumni leadership, because that was another point of tension, and we don't want to change and this and that, and so I think we worked it out, and we're all University of North Georgia,
right?
And and Dr. Jacobs likes to say that each campus has its own kind of identity and personality, and that's true, and we want to try to celebrate that and continue to create that. Across each campus.
Right.
And, that filters into how we work out our academic mix of programmatic offerings,
right.
Et cetera. And I think we're making steady progress. And,
well, I know that also you are obviously heavily involved in the budgets. And every year we get around to tuition and all that kind of stuff. Explain to folks a little bit more about how that happens with the state, as far as what percentage of the money comes from the state and what percentage comes from tuitions and other fees or for donations, or however it breaks down. Because I think there's been a huge change since I was here to what it is currently, and maybe explains a little bit about the tuition.
Well, kind of the two key components are state appropriation and tuition, and those two are, the other things are sort of incidental. There can be other support things, but those are the two components. And so as you were mentioning 20 plus years ago, the formula, the way that we were structured, UNG was 75% or higher state appropriation, and then a very small amount of tuition, 25% or less. Right. And then over probably the last 2 decades, there's been a level of state disinvestment, not disinterest, but disinvestment, in that there are so many priorities, whether it's K through 12 or insurance or the prison system or this or that, technical college system, etc. A lot of demands on that, and then with 2 recessions, one or 2 recessions during that whole time. So now that percentage is somewhere around 50-50. So a rather dramatic drop. And then at one point, a couple of years ago, the tuition piece was higher than the state piece. And so we had a cost of living adjustment last year that helped bring up the state piece a little bit. And so that has really changed the whole dynamic. So tuition has went up. And I think maybe higher ed gets beat up a little bit about that well, it's profit taking, and was it really necessary, etc. And I think to continue to deliver the quality education that UNG is known for, right, and so many schools in the state, but UNG in particular, requires a certain investment level. And but interestingly, I don't think our tuition rates went up in 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
And
thanks to somebody being on top of the budget and making sure that creatively we didn't have to do that, maybe.
Yeah. So it has been tough, and then there have been some other challenges, reduction in budget, related to anticipation of a state decline around the COVID pandemic, and so there were 10% cuts issued across all state agencies, and turned out we didn't really need the state didn't need to do those cuts, but they remained in place. So that's an $8 million hit to the University of North Georgia.
Wow.
So it kind of, you notice.
Well, in spite of all that, I see that we publicize every once in a while. We're still in one of the best buys in certainly in the South and partially in the nation and the state, both for the tuition and for veterans stuff. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yeah, well, any number of those publications. I think Forbes declared UNG a best value. I may not have the right publication, but there's a half dozen of those per year that come up and that help to show the value of a University of North Georgia degree. I think another thing that I give Dr. Jacobs a lot of credit for is he really these student-based scholarships,
yes.
Fulbright, Goldwater, and the like. Tremendous increase in the number of Fulbrights coming out of UNG, and they really have came from all of our campuses.
All five.
Yes, from all five. And I don't want to understate that. That's not easy to get, and so that shows a commitment on the academic side, and so we're really proud of that.
Well, you've mentioned academics a couple of times. I know that's not your specialty, so to speak, as it relates, but I would have to think in those formulas about the best value and everything, they've got to take in consideration that UNG is right up at the top, usually in the top 3 within the state on the academic side. Can you fill us in on that?
That does factor in, the formulas. Those various rating agencies have different things, but also things like retention, graduation rates, etc., factor in to the value. And again, you'll see UNG in the top 4, 5, 6 of the 26 public universities, and really almost any of those metrics that you might want to look at, you'll see we're up near the top.
All right.
And that's a very intentional thing that we do.
Right. You've mentioned the impact, and I know we used to have, and I think they still do, some kind of studies that come out occasionally that talks about the impact of the University of North Georgia as it relates to the region, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and also the impact and the relationship we have with Lumpkin County and the city of Dahlonega.
Sure. So the economic impact, so the Carl Vinson Institute at UGA does these economic impact studies, and UNG's annual budget is approaching $300 million a year, and each and every year. And so the economic impact, I think the last one was $900 million a year. That's across the 5 county area that we serve, and so it's huge. It's a huge economic impact. We either are the largest or one of the largest employers in each of these regions where we are. We spend a lot of time in developing partnerships with the city and county government and working together on projects, whether it's a sidewalk project, light, intersection, serving on the development authorities, search committees, any of those things. I think you really have to be intentional about those kinds of partnerships, and they need to understand what the university is doing across each of our campuses, so that they're informed.
Right.
Because if they're not informed, they will make up things, intentionally or otherwise. Well, so and so said this. Well, let's hear it from the university. So we spend a good bit of our time, our regional vice presidents and others, that a big part of their job now is to make sure that they're engaged with the city governments, the county governments, where our campuses are located.
Right.
And you just have to continually work with that.
Incidentally, on an earlier edition of this video series, we had J.B. Jones, and J.B. Jones was an employee, was the assistant manager of the canteen when I was here, but then he became the sole county commissioner for Lumpkin County. And
he's my cousin, by the way.
Oh, is that right?
Yes,
okay.
he is.
Well, he's a great guy, and I would encourage you to go back and look at that video if you have not seen it. But he was probably as at least it relates to the Dahlonega campus, was instrumental in beginning the true partnership between the government and the university. So glad to hear that that's continuing. And say hello to JB when you talk.
I sure will. I sure will.
There's you referred to it a minute ago, something about academics, and we chatted about how UNG ranks overall, but and again, I know that's not your specialty, but highlight for us a little bit, because I think we lose track of how many different degrees we offer, how many departments we offer, how many different programs, and you may not have all those off the top of your head, but it's just enormous growth in that arena, as well as all the other things that we've talked about.
Well, there certainly has been enormous growth. I can't quote the exact numbers. Certainly our business programs and computer science have done extremely well. The natural sciences have done well. Our professional programs in nursing and education, those all continue to do extremely well. I think a good bit of what we're having to do now, in light of these budget reductions that we're facing, which approximates about $20 million over the last 5 to 6 years, so it's rather significant. And so I think our leadership team spends a good bit of time. This is speaking for the provost who I work with closely, and her deans and her leadership, making sure we right size the programs that we do offer, right, to make sure that we're offering programs that meet either serve a need that's important to UNG.
Right.
And so,
well, all of those programs that we could sit here probably if we had all the statistics and brag on them and brag on them and brag on them, and one of the ones that I don't think we mentioned, other than your degree, education has been a kind of a staple for the university for years in this area. It's one of the reasons that we had such much growth and such reputation back in the day, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's continuing to excel in those areas, and then adding the doctoral degree in educational doctorate in higher ed administration. I think it's a great opportunity. We've had a number of UNG employees go through the program, and employees from all over the system are going through our program. And so I think it's helping to equip the next generation of leaders, right, to continue to teach and that promote education.
Yeah. Well, another one that we have not talked about, and you mentioned early on when you were discussing, you were not part of the Corps of Cadets, but I can tell you, having been involved deeply with the Corps of Cadets, you have been a huge supporter for the Corps of Cadets. Back when I was on the Alumni Council, as well as with the North Georgia Corps of Cadets Association. But right, tell us from your perspective why you think that the military program here is such a wonderful program, and what it means to the university, and why you're such a big advocate for it.
Well, I think it's any institution of higher education. You want to have things that set you apart, and so having the Corps of Cadets here and such a great leadership laboratory that the Corps represents, I think gives UNG a distinctive competency that so many schools don't have. And the Corps Cadets have been a part of UNG since its founding. Right. And while we celebrate the sesquicentennial now, the Corps has always been here. Right. And so I have seen that. I've experienced it growing up and attending school here. And I just think it is a great piece. I think it's good that our cadets interact with non-cadets. I think that gives a well-rounded for leaders if they commission, etc. I think there's another great opportunity for our cadets who don't do a commissioning track.
Right.
To still take advantage of that program. And, the leadership traits, I hear so many of my mentors that I get to know and talk about what the Corps meant to them, and that opportunity, the camaraderie, the fellowship. When you go through that together, you tend to stick together throughout your life. And I think that's such a great thing. And you see that missing in so many other areas. And I find other areas of the university trying to create that.
Right.
So the Corps will always be a part of the University of North Georgia. It is a critical component. It takes a significant investment, but that's okay. You can never take it for granted, and never take for granted that you have enough cadets coming in, that you get the cadets graduated. You have to continue, it's a continuous process.
Right.
But that also applies for all of our students. But it's just a particular pleasure for me to support the Corps and to be able to see them and just their decor rubs off on our other students, and it just creates an environment for UNG Dahlonega in particular, where our Corps exists, that's unique.
Right.
And I'm really proud that we have it.
I've heard other faculty make comments that where they have been on faculty in other institutes of higher education to move here, what a difference it is as far as not only the quality of the cadets, but how courteous they are and how involved they are. Well, we've talked about a little bit of everything, but
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you one more thing. Again, no, it's not your specialty, but you have been involved with it so much. Talk a little bit about the total athletic program and the fact that you mentioned some of the convocation center and that kind of stuff, but there's been a lot of support from individuals that have helped in addition to whatever monies the university's been able to come up with.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, I'll give credit to our presidents all the way back to Sherm Day. Sherm taught me the value of the importance of athletics and the co-curricular support for an institution of higher education. And he believed that, and the following presidents, Hansford Potter and Dr. Jacobs, all believed that.
Right.
And so that helps tremendously. And the presidents, and particularly Dr. Jacobs, has allowed me to help on fundraising and other things with the athletic programs. They have supported some significant investments that we really need to do if we're going to have the programs. And so those things have happened. And then the private support. The video boards, for example, and the outdoor fields were all a private contribution from Glenn Cottrell. Right. There's a brand new video board in the Convocation Center that's as good as anything you'll see in an NBA venue, and that was a private contribution from the Cottrells.
Right.
And and by fielding really quality teams, that creates interest in your sports and your programs. We're seeing a lot more student interest. Our soccer games are heavily attended by students, just as an example.
Right.
And softball and baseball, and our basketball programs. So it's just NCAA athletics are the very best in Division II. And I think because we've been able to invest in our programs, it shows our facilities are the best of, I think, any in Division II. There might be one or two that will argue with me, but there's not many. And that's been really intentional. And I think it maximizes the opportunity for our student athletes and creates an environment that's really good for the university, creates pride, and so we're just really happy with it.
Just coincidentally, yesterday I was at my Atlanta Vietnam Veterans Business Association, and one of my friends there, who is a retired baseball coach, and has actually served as head of all of the dugout clubs for the state of Georgia, and he instructs in the international and the World Series and so forth. And he told me, he said, "I'm coming up to North Georgia to see my friends and go to a baseball game. You guys have some of the best sports venues of any place I've ever been."
Yeah.
So just
very proud of that.
Just proud of it. Sure thing. Well, before we wrap up, Dr. McConnell, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about? Maybe some of the accomplishments you think that come out of the finance budget area, or anything, any topic, anything. Turn it over to you.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's been a lifetime pursuit of joy for me to have the opportunity to work here. If you love your work, it doesn't feel like work, and it has been that way for me now for almost 36 years. And so I've created lifetime friends from my fraternity, from my classmates, had the honor of learning under legends of the classroom, and that's what I like to call them, and from Larry Dennis, who was my mentor in accounting. And you hate to start names and miss one. John Pierce, was so many, and John Shomar, and there are many others. But it was just such a great experience, and so I'm just really thankful to be a part of University of North Georgia, and to be a small part of these chapters of our history. And so, it's been my great pleasure to do that.
Well, it's been a great era. Dr. McConnell, I appreciate you coming so much and being with us today. And I hope that the folks will have an opportunity to review this tape as well as some of the others. And go Nighthawks.
Go Nighthawks.